And Monique.
Hi, so I'm Monique, I'm a PhD student in psychology, and I am extremely passionate about my 30 seconds could be summarised as, yes, we are all facing Brexit as universities, and yes, we all have the same issues across universities, and yet our university saw an increase in executive pay by 29% between 2015-16 and now, whereas other universities have seen vice-chancellors' pay go down by 25%. So we're going literally in the opposite direction, which means clearly there are steps that could be taken, and clearly we are not taking them. So, kind of sums it up.
Thank you, Nick. We'll move on now to some questions based on your remarks you've made in the past, your manifestos and whatnot. So to the Yes campaign, so Marco, you mentioned feedback and sort of limiting course sizes for better teaching. So the business school's got a massive cohort, who don't even fit in this room. Compulsory modules can range from over 500 to 700 students. What benefit would there be if you limited the course size if the quality of teaching is currently already poor?
Absolutely. So at the moment there's a review for the business department to try and improve the student-staff ratio to get more staff in. Now, what the university is doing is that it needs more income. Otherwise, 10 years from now, the university will not be here, and that's a serious problem. So the university wants to keep teaching people, and so what it's doing is it's trying to get income in other ways, maybe growing other course sizes to try and make up for this deficit. So it will try and raise staff within the business department, try and improve the quality of teaching by doing this, maybe having more engagement using technology, flipped classroom, all of these things. But it's a very serious problem. It's very hard to deal with, because if I were to pass it on to somebody else without losing any money, without spending a single pound more, what would you do?
It's a good question. Monique, do you want to respond to that point that Marco's just made?
I feel like the math doesn't add up there. If we want more students, but we want smaller staff to student ratio, then we also need more staff. Except we're not hiring any more staff, and we're cutting staff and increasing student numbers.
Right. If you want to respond to
yeah,
that.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot to clarify. So we're talking about the business school, and then we start talking about the university as a whole. Different courses have different ratios. So we have some courses which are hugely expensive and with too few students. And so what's happening is that maybe I'm paying my fees and you're paying your fees, but my course is super expensive. So what's happening, instead of, I'm taking all the money that you're paying towards the university, and instead of spending it on the students' union, instead of spending it on the sports park, you're spending it on my course. And that's inherently unfair. So we're trying to get to balance out all the good courses and great courses that are all around the university, but also not spend all the money on a single course that takes away value from people's degree. Now, the issue with numbers is that we're trying to grow numbers within certain courses, which have a good student-staff ratio, and try and decrease it in others and balance it out. So it's not. So we're talking about two different things: the business school, which we're trying to decrease numbers and raise staff, and the rest of the university, which is counteracting that. So that's how it works.
Okay, thank you, Marco. Any final comment on that, Monique?
Yes, we're freezing any new staff, including in the business school. And aside from that glaringly obvious point, yes, every student, apart from international students who pay phenomenally more, we all pay the same amount of fees if you're an undergrad. Yes, some courses cost more because you have to use lab space, all of that technology. I'm not entirely sure I'd characterize balancing a budget as inherently unfair, because someone's degree is slightly cheaper and someone else's is more expensive, because at the end of the day you've got the same access to services unless you're disabled. So in actuality, I'm not entirely sure I understand your point. Overall, the ratio of staff to students is growing. We have more PhD students doing teaching than I think I've ever seen it in my few years here, which means the quality of the teaching, you know, it's people who don't have 10 years experience delivering it. We're seeing a growing gap where there's more early career researchers doing more hours, doing a turnaround in insane amounts of time. I mean, you mentioned 500 in core modules in the business school. We've got to turn around all of that feedback within 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And we're meant to do it while also applying for other jobs because our job might not exist in a couple weeks.
Okay. If I could move on to another point that I'm sure people in the university would probably like us to make. Like, it's clear, and we've seen the figures, that we have fallen down the rankings overall, but we have some leading courses in the country and globally. To name a few, we're, according to the Complete University Guide, 3rd for food science, 3rd for hospitality, 4th for nursing, 1st for criminology, 2nd for music. And this takes into account a lot of factors, anything from sort of research quality, student satisfaction. So the argument that some people may make would be, does this high performance, when you throw in things like the Queen's Anniversary Prize for Food Nutrition, the 5G Innovation Centre is world leading, does this not justify the senior management's pay?
I mean, if that were an argument, then surely people in Oxford and Cambridge would be earning more.
Okay. Marco, do you have something to say about this?
I'm not sure where you got your figures for the senior management from, but the senior management last year, the raise was below what the staff was raised, excluding any raises the staff got because of their career and their career progression. So that's number one. The EB didn't get a huge raise, 7%, I think you claim on your poster, which is completely wrong. Number two, in terms of,
definitely wrong. What was the raise? What was the figure?
1.47%, if you like that.
Do you have stats to disagree with that?
Yes. I also, apart from that,
Well,
can I
I'm not sure where you got your stats
We're
from.
both disagreeing on a figure here. So where's your figure for the 1.47? Where are you getting that figure from?
From the university.
Okay. And where's the 7% figure come from?
The 7% figure is from the university, from their remuneration document, 2017-2018.
I understand students are going to be a bit confused if the university is putting out both of these figures. So we'll have to try and figure out which one is... does the 17...
Also,
7%? Go ahead.
Can I point out that it's a 7% in pay, basic pay, but actually when you look at it, including the other benefits for a total pay package, it comes out at closer to 14%. And apart from that, right, it is now 10 times the median salary, up by 0.7 or 8% compared to the median salary of staff here, and it's 22 times that of the lowest paid member of staff. So you might say, well, it increased less than the median, but let's think about that for a second. 1% on what, like 30,000 compared to 1.3% on 400,000 is a pretty big difference.
I think a lot of numbers are going to be thrown around here.
Yeah, exactly. I think we should look at the numbers and see what's actually happening. The national living wage and the pay rises for all of the staff are agreed on a national level, and these have been of 1.7%, they've been 2% in the past, plus whatever pay rises these individuals get. The pay for the executive board is 1.5%, the increase, and that's the average, because speaking to people at the university who are dealing with the numbers, that's what they've said. Now, in responding to your question with the academics and using postgraduates, the Department for Higher Education at the university is training these academics to teach better. So it's not, we're not just throwing in academics who have no experience, we're training them as well so that they have the facilities and they have the capabilities to teach. And why are we doing this? Because there's a problem of money. And if we have no money, the university crashes, and then there'll be no more university. So we're trying to address a very difficult issue, and you still haven't explained how you're going to solve it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's fairly easy.
And then I have a final question about this topic. Go ahead.
Cut executive board pay. And also, having sat through the Department for Higher Education training, because I had to do it, it is 2 modules, each of which lasts about an hour. So a good 2 hours training before you're teaching classes of 30, 40 students in tutorials and giving feedback, and I mean marking 50 papers, 80 papers. So yeah, a good investment. 2 hours, great training.
If we could come back around to the pay, and this would apply, I suppose, to all levels of the university. Do you agree the university needs to offer staff competitive salaries to get the best and most talented people to work here? It's a job market in a sense.
Well, like I said, Oxford, Cambridge, we are nowhere close to those. The universities that were equivalent when we were fourth have stayed where they are. We have fallen.
Right.
How many years has this university been here, and how many years has Oxford been around? Oxford is the oldest university in the world. Okay, it has a certain prestige, it has endowments, it has people who give them millions of pounds every year. This university doesn't have that, and it's trying to compete, so it needs the best people at the top. Now, you may argue whatever you like about their performance, but if you're trying to compete for people who have experience and who have been in the sector a long time, you need to pay for them, otherwise they just go
I
somewhere
suppose
else.
when you're hiring people as well, an important thing to consider is, there's a sort of cost of living, things that have to go on when you're deciding what you might get paid to work somewhere. So, I mean, Oxford's also quite a pricey place to live, but Guildford's not cheap to live. So when they're looking at hiring people, they've got to decide what to pay them, and it's all kind of a competitive market, I suppose, is the argument that we made.
Well, it's quite lucky when you're VC, you don't have to pay rent. You get your house for free.
Do you know what that house is, do you know what that house is used for?
What's it used for?
Every year, the VC raises money for the university. In 6 months, he has raised 6 million. That's 2% of the budget, just by hosting events and having people invest in the university. That's what that house is used for. How much would that house cost every year? Maybe 100,000? So I think he's made his money back 60 times over.
I'm not going to outright disagree, but I haven't seen those figures. I'd be curious to know. I'm getting some faces from the audience, so I'd be curious to know where those figures have come from.
Absolutely. If you go speak to the university leadership, I'm sure they can provide you with those.
Are there any published documents that you can actually reference, such as
And we have, hang on, we have a...
as opposed to just a vague, the university, where someone could have told you any number that they've decided to come up with, and you're taking it as read, as opposed to any actual reportable, substantiated figures.
So the question from the floor, because I'm not sure whether the microphone was working for the live stream, was whether we should believe a figure that comes from a university source and whether these figures are published, I think was the question.
Absolutely. Well, I can send you any documents, any forwards of any official emails, and then we can have that figure for you. I think to distrust the university when they're doing one of the hardest jobs for the lowest pay, because anybody who is here at the university gets paid a lot less than they would be paid in the private sector. The employees, yes. The university makes £300 million a year. That's a third of £1 billion pounds, excuse me. An equivalent company in the UK that makes that much money, the managing director makes at least double.
That's not necessarily profit in the year.
That's revenue, that's turnover, yes. But an equivalent company makes as much. Well,
Technically,
from
we're
the floor,
registered as a
we hear that
charity.
it's not a business, absolutely. But the problem is the government stopped funding the university and makes it act as a private sector individual. What used to happen was the government would give out grants. Now it no longer gives out grants. So how are we going to invest and get a beautiful library that costs £30 million and then £4 million in recent years? How are we going to get a sports park that's over £20 million? How are we going to get all these facilities? We need to pay for them. And so this is a solution. I don't know what the solution is from the left.
The point is valid about how the government isn't really funding universities in a sustainable way. So what can the university do about it?
Well, actually take a stand on it, first of all, because our university's been very, very quiet about all of it and about privatisation of higher education. And you know what I find absolutely fascinating? In the same time that they've been quiet about it, their pay's been going up and up. Now, why would we not want a private higher education? Probably because it's for the benefit of humanity. It's just a sensible thing. Why would the people who are benefiting financially at really high rates decide, we should fight this privatization and thus lose our hefty, 22k worth of bonuses each year?
It's a good question, but I think I'd like to go to the floor. The first hand I saw was Holly Marquez, so if we can get a microphone across. quite a big lecture theatre. I'm sure Liv can get them.
I'm really sorry. Oh, gosh, I'm croaky. This isn't actually a real question. I was just going to say, I think it takes real guts to go up onto the stage by Marco, and everybody obviously has different opinions here, but I think it'd be nice if people don't heckle him or shout facts in his face.
Yeah, that's quite fair.
Thank you, Holly.
I may be with no, but also it's just nice because, you know, he's just representing, and someone's got to do it, if it's not the university. Sorry.
No, I appreciate that. I'm going to take a real question now from Alex, if that's okay. It's the next down low, so.
So you're saying
Try to
that
keep
these
the questions
issues
to
are...
both candidates.
Okay, so both candidates. So there's a recognition by both of you that this is a systemic issue in the United Kingdom across the entire process of the marketisation of higher education. However, as one of the candidates has pointed out, even in universities where there is a, higher level of marketisation, one might argue, the pay grades are lower. Fundamentally, a university is made up of its staff. Without the staff, there are no students. Without the staff, there is no research. Ultimately, shouldn't we be focusing on the staff as the key thing to be funding in the university? By cutting the staff, aren't we undercutting the university?
Yes, because here's the thing. Investment into buildings is one thing, and I know that, the university will feed you the line that they need to grow, they need to grow, they need to grow. And yes, fair enough, if they want to grow, grow, but buildings don't teach you, people do. And it's the lecturers, it's the staff, it's the students, PhD students, who are doing massive amounts of research for what equates to less than minimum wage, I might point out, working literally day and night. Those are the people who get up, who lecture, who grade your papers, who do all of it. They literally just do all of the work that you guys come here for. You come for an education. That is what we aim to give, and the hub or the hive or the hubble or whatever isn't going to lecture you, it isn't going to keep up to date with research, and it isn't going to be the thing that means that you can go out there and be employed.
Okay, would you like to get
Yeah, absolutely. So, for every £1 that you pay, the university spends half of it on staff. Okay, so staff is a huge problem. Now, if there were no university, the staff wouldn't receive anything and we wouldn't have anything. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the best possible situation. Now, the wages are set by a national committee, national institute. So that means that the university doesn't actually get to set them. It tries to improve and give as much as possible. But at the same time, students want services. Students want funding to the students' union. Students want the sports park. Students want help for international students. Students want hardship funds. These are all funded by the fees we pay. And if we spend too much on one thing, we'll cut back on the other.
Okay, fair enough.
Yes, and that's literally my argument. Cut back on building hotels and actually pay your staff.
Now, what the university does is it wants to be competitive. It wants to be attractive. You want students to come to you because you have something to offer. Now, if we're one of the top-ranking universities for hospitality and management, we're going to build a hotel to make sure that they have the facilities to practice and to do what they need. If you have a university that's excelling in biomedical sciences, well, then you build something like IFH. If you're excelling in technology and communications, you have a huge cybersecurity unit. You have 5G. You have the ATI. So that's what we're spending money on.
To ask a question to both candidates, start with Mark. Mark, you studied physics?
Physics.
If you were approached by a prospective undergraduate today looking to study in your subject area, 2019, and was considering Surrey, what would you say to them?
What I would tell them is we have one of the best students' unions in the country, I believe. And there's a lot of stuff that we can do. There's a lot of stuff you can do if you want to get involved. And I think that's really good, and we're very close to London, so if you want to go to events there, you want to go find a job there, you can.
More focusing on the university side, though, would you promote the university? Would you say, yeah, come to Surrey?
Absolutely. If you the senior management aren't just robots who just want money. The point of getting money is so then we can use that money to pay for things for students. Okay?
Okay,
That's
I'm
the
going
point.
to
Yeah.
ask a similar question to Monique. You study psychology?
Yes.
Would you encourage an undergraduate looking at Surrey to come to Surrey?
It depends. Are they white and able-bodied and very middle class? Because if they are, then they're going to do better than black students, disabled students, mature students, poor students. So,
And would you feel it's certainly an interesting topic to bring up?
Sorry,
But
I mean, this statement is shocking if we take it.
hang on, can we get a microphone? You're a full member of the Students' Union. Student?
am.
Excellent.
So,
okay, go ahead.
So, I mean, if we believe this statement at face value, it's absolutely outrageous and shocking. So I would like that you justify
Okay.
and you give a bit more than just
Okay.
a few words.
so for example,
that.
there's an attainment gap, especially between black students and white students, where consistently black students are coming out with lower degrees. And I don't think that's because there's some inherent difference. No, it's because they're having a different experience here. Similarly, I mean, I'm in a wheelchair and I can tell you now that the campus isn't accessible. I can tell you that disabled students are more likely to drop out of the University of Surrey than non-disabled students.
Is this focused more on Surrey? Is this a very Surrey-specific issue, do you think? Or is this an issue that's facing a lot of universities?
Yeah, it's an issue that's facing a lot of universities. The issue here is that other universities are doing something about it. We haven't even started, literally, because I stood on a committee that feeds into a committee, that feeds into a committee, that feeds into a larger committee that eventually gets to University Council, and it's kind of like a game of whispers. Anyway, we didn't even record half of this information in a centralized place for ages. Even though we ask people in demographics when they come in to actually find out the attainment, right? It took that 8 months or something stupid to knot together a document, and I think it ended up in a freedom of information request and a whole bunch just to get the actual numbers. Mm-hmm. And then when I was pushing to find out about the attainment of disabled students, for example, their reply was, well, we don't really break it down into those with physical disabilities or those with any other kind of disabilities, but that might be because people with physical disabilities don't really want to come here.
Right.
Can I reply to this,
Yeah,
please?
awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
Perfect. So, the university was built in the 1960s. In the 1960s, they didn't really keep all of your inconveniences in mind, and I do apologize for that. Plus,
wheelchairs existed in the 1960s.
Absolutely, I agree with you. But did the people then have the same thought to help people in wheelchairs to get around campus? I don't think so.
I don't need help. I don't need
I don't
help.
think so. So
No.
what the university is doing right now is making sure that every new building that we're renovating.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are.
I am involved in it and they are not. I can tell you now, my department just got renovated, whatever, right? Doors in there, too heavy, don't have a button.
Well, then that's something we should probably fix.
I have
agree.
been doing that. I have been working towards that for more than a year and a half. I sit on 5 different committees doing exactly that, and I can tell you that the new buildings are not accessible. And they are not making the buildings accessible. And I have fought, literally, blood, sweat and tears. I got an award, for God's sake, last night for what I've done for that. And I couldn't even get on the stage to get it.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I know it must be really stressing and.
It was G-Live, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was July.
It doesn't matter because it wasn't taken into account, and that's a systemic problem at the university.
I do understand that, and I do feel sorry for you.
I don't want your pity.
I do feel sorry for you because it's not a nice thing. So.
Pardon? You feel sorry for me? I don't. For Christ's sake, I'm leading my field just about, and I'm only a PhD student.
Well, I feel sorry for you for the inconveniences you have to face every day. That's what.
I don't think
and that's not a lie.
coming from the wrong place here. I don't think he's...
It doesn't matter where he's coming from.
Anyways, so let's.
We're going to have to try and
So
move the conversation on a little bit.
The problem is, the university was built in the 1960s. Now, every time we have a renovation, they're trying to fix it. You talked about the black attainment gap. The university has seen that the main source of issue is maths students, maths and statistics. So it's offering maths and statistics programs to all of their students, particularly targeted at black students who may have more difficulties. That's one of the things that they are doing. They're creating BAME champions within individual departments to try and help minorities to try and see if maybe that helps. So the university is doing stuff, but perhaps it's not effective, and that's where the feedback comes in, and we're trying to get that.
Okay.
We're talking about management. Just one more point.
Go ahead.
You talk about management, and there being so many subcommittees. That's absolutely a problem. And so what they're doing is with EVS, they prioritize with reducing management and keeping academics and all the frontline people who actually help students. So that's a real cost-saving measure.
Is that in a document somewhere?
That is not our document. You're very welcome to go speak to the university staff because it'd be helpful to
There
talk
we
to
I've
go.
been hearing this a lot. If we can, I can't see where the lights are quite bright. Is that Toby at the back of the room? Can I have microphones taken, please?
I'll just quickly point out that in all the restructurings we have had in the last 8 years, it's never senior management that goes.
Okay.
Middleman.
Let's go to Toby.
I just wanted to say, I think we're straying away from the main point. Obviously, we're here to discuss whether to formation of no confidence in the Vice Chancellor. Now, the question is, if we had a different...
Can we just clarify first of all, because we need to be careful. This is against the executive board and the governing bodies of the university in general, no specific member of staff.
Okay.
To be clear. But carry on.
Cool. But what I'm trying to say is that if we had a different, governing board of staff, whatever, would any of these like issues we're discussing be any different? Because that's the fundamental question. If we had a different board, would any of these issues disappear? I don't honestly think they would. I think a lot of them are to do with wider society,
Okay.
and so that's what it's going to take to get my vote. Will voting for this actually mean anything, or are we just meaninglessly talking about issues that affect university? Yeah.
No, and here's what I can tell you. I can tell you that someone in senior management spent £2,600 on membership to a gentleman's club of the universities. Oh, sorry, no, they've started letting women in a few years ago, so it's more acceptable. Spent £2,600 on that. And then justified it by saying, well, we can have meetings in London now. Well, fantastic. And there are a lot of places where the university is doing this. For example, sustainability. If they had met their goal by now, we wouldn't be in a shortfall. Because they had methods of saving money in the long term. All they would have to do is spend some in the short term. And they decided, no, it's fine. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, we have a predicted £15 million deficit. Predicted, and that's despite, in their remuneration report, saying that they are overachieving in terms of surplus, which means that it's not every university, it's specifically how this university is run, because they are spending money on literally gentlemen's clubs while overachieving in terms of the surplus, giving themselves 22k bonuses for targets that they set themselves, by the way, and then cutting staff without actually providing anyone with a proper breakdown of the numbers. Not every university is doing that. That's just us. And like I said, Southampton, as an equivalent university, their VC took a 27.5% pay cut rather than cutting jobs.
Okay. So we're going to respond. So there's obviously comments about spending university money on gentlemen's clubs.
Absolutely.
Something like that needs to be responded to, I think.
Certainly, yeah, there's a whole list of things. Perfect. So that's something certainly that the university should look into and revise, and I think it's very good that we brought that up. But then in terms of processes, there's a whole team of 12 people who are going around trying to find places where we can actually save money. So that's been happening, and we've been simplifying processes. For example, admitting PhD students, there were something like 80 steps, and now it's been taken down to a manageable number. The borehole, thank you very much to Nick Warren for... Thank you. because now that's actually happening, and that's really good. In terms of the deficit, the deficit has come about because we have to pay more for pensions, and that's something that's being contracted nationally. That's not the university's choice. So the university has to spend 6 million more a year from next year to pay for these pensions. Then the targets set for management, I believe they're set by council, not by management themselves, and they're held accountable by council. And the whole sector is in fall. Sheffield and Kent are firing many, many people. And they're in a much worse position than us. We've just been ahead of the game and said, okay, we're going to do these smaller cuts right now. They are going to be painful, but they could be not nearly as bad as Reading, for example.
Okay.
But those universities and those cuts, I mean, that's kind of like saying, well, my friend shot themselves in the chest, so it's not too bad that I've shot myself in the foot.
No, it's more like saying we're all drowning, except I'm going to learn to swim before I jump into the water. That's what it's like.
Interesting analogies, but I don't think they're going to get anywhere. So if I could go to Nick for the next question. Where is the lips coming? Hello, Nick.
Hello.
Yes.
So in 2009, the CES, Centre for Environment Sustainability, presented the executive board with a document that was a sustainability plan to make cuts and to make the university more environmental and also more efficient. That then got revised in 2011 and watered down, and then got further revised in 2013 and got watered down. There were plans to alternate, so move from the carbon-based current energy forms that we have to renewable energies. That measure was cut down, and that hasn't happened. And given that the university is spending over £3 million on electricity here, why is it that the executive board decided to cut staff before making the university more sustainable and environmental?
That's a good question. Andy, would you like to go back?
Thank you. Yeah. So the university recently renegotiated all of their contracts with Power, for example, to get a much better rate. In terms of the borehole, that is now happening, and they just need to get some kind of accreditation for it. Now, they have plans to put PV panels and also for water boilers and all of that, and for heating, etc. So things are happening, but they're very expensive.
Why did they not happen earlier on?
That's a very good question. We should ask the previous management. We should ask the previous management that. The problem is that the current management came in recently. So that's something they're addressing right now, here and today.
We can't name members of university staff. Thank you.
So they're addressing the problems here and today, and that's what should matter, honestly.
So just to counter that, there's high up university staff who have been here for more than 25 years. That's the first point. The second point is it is gross incompetence, and it's where priorities are laid for them, and it wasn't sexy at the time. It wasn't sexy to do environmental anything, so the university took shortcuts. If they hadn't taken the shortcut, we wouldn't be in the situation where we're choosing between, do we save the world or do we save some people's jobs? Because we'd be able to do both.
Okay, that's an interesting point. Very, very briefly, and then we're going to go to another question.
I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, we have to save the world. We also have to save all the funding we have for everything that we fund for students. And cutting people's jobs, they're offered a package which is very convenient economically for them, and they can decide to take it or not to take it. No one was forced out. Everyone had an option.
We're moving to non-voluntary redundancies.
No, we're not, because EVS has just finished.
They have not ruled it out.
Well, it's not happening, and it won't happen very soon.
Okay.
Exactly. They haven't with any of the unions.
At the moment, they've neutralized their deficit, 9 million from staff and 6 million from other expenses that have been cut. So at the moment, there's not that much of a problem. We have to see what happens in the future, but the university cannot bind itself. The only thing the university wants to do is to make the best thing possible for students. So it's keeping all the hardship funds, it's keeping the USSU subvention, and it's keeping all the services and frontline staff. That's what's happening.
Okay, sorry, can
I just... We're going
I
to have
just
to wrap at this point.
check?
Very, very quickly, please.
Literally no document out there between, as far as I know, any of the unions and the university where they rule out, and I don't mean indefinitely, you say binding, where they rule out non-voluntary redundancies in 2019.
This is true.
That is completely unsubstantiated. And it's easy enough to sit there and say, well, you know, we've got to save all these other things for students, but someone actually needs to teach them. That's what we're trying to save. Jobs, people actually doing the teaching.
Well, if there's no university, I promise you there will be no jobs.
I'd like to move on, please. I know people have got their hands up, but I'm going to recognise Theo over here who had the question.
Hello, is this on? Okay.
Yes.
I've got three things to say.
Excellent.
Firstly, Oxford isn't the oldest university in the world. I don't even think it's the oldest university in Europe, by the by. Yes, in Morocco. Yep. Anyway, so I have a question for each of you. So for Monique, I'd like to know, you mentioned earlier that that Surrey's managerial board get paid more than that of Oxford, and I'd like to know how much more. Secondly, for Marco, you spoke about how, and I think the question at the back was very on point about what the whole thing that this is about in terms of why, the wider problem, is this just Surrey or not? So you mentioned the pensions, and as I understand it, this problem with the pensions increasing is a problem that should have been foreseen, right? At the moment, the university has just gone, oh, shit, we now owe way more money than we thought we did. Whereas, in theory, you would have thought that this plan should have been in place to be able to see this coming and action should have been taken in accordance to it. Why has that not been done?
Okay. And was your point leading on from that? Give her the microphone, sir. Yeah. You asked a question for both candidates. It was two questions. It was a 2-point.
You can both very welcome to answer it.
Monique, if you'd like to go first.
Okay, wonderful. I have to double check. All I know is that the highest in the UK, the total remuneration package was, I think, 450,000, and the highest Surrey has been for VC is 400,000 total, a bit more, including basic pay and all of the remuneration, including the 50,000 that he got in a year towards his pension. So while we're on the topic of expensive pensions. And yes, we should have been able to foresee it, and I'm not going to sit here for a second and think that people that high up, all of whom, or a lot of whom, have doctorates, didn't know. At the end of the day, these are problems in terms of pension that face every single university, and yet we are the one that is somehow astounded by this news.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure you'd agree that every other university in the sector is facing the same problem. Perhaps, let's just talk about the pension system for a bit. This used to be the old pension system, where how much you got during your pension was based on how much you earned. Now, the problem with that is obviously if you have fewer people with a declining higher education sector, there's less and less people paying to the pot, and more people taking money out of the pot. So every other private sector has gone out of this and done it based on how much money you've put in. So that's number one, just for you guys to understand why the pensions are that way. Now, Theo, I'm not sure why the university didn't have a look at it before. What I do know is that only now the administration of the pensions decided, oh wait, this is now a problem. Why didn't the administration of the pensions do this 10 years ago? That's the real question, I think.
No, the question is, why didn't management take action on this earlier?
In what sense? Do you mean in the short term, or?
They should have made steps to improve this problem beforehand, which in my opinion shows a lack of responsibility.
Well, with what money?
The question from the back is, with what money?
If they predicted that they're going to be in debt in the future, what money? Where was the money going to come from?
So to repeat the question from the back, because there's no microphone up there, is if they knew they were going to be in debt, then they... Can you repeat the question for me so I can...
If they knew they were going to be in debt in the future, where would they have gotten the money from?
If they knew they were going to be in debt in the future, where would they have got the money from?
See, it makes
my
no
point-
sense because if they cut 10 years ago, you guys...
Can we get a mic to Toby if he's going to...
If they had cut 10 years ago,
hang on.
5 years ago, you guys would be saying the same thing that you're saying now.
Hang
And why is the university making...
Toby, wait, there's lots of
Okay.
people wanting to watch on YouTube
So-
that I'm sure are going to want to hear what you...
What I'm trying to say is that if your main argument for voting for this motion of no confidence is the fact that they made cuts to protect themselves in the future, if they had made the cuts 5 years ago, you guys would have been arguing the same thing. So
No.
what is the actual solution? Where is this money going to come from? At the end of the day, cuts had to be made so that we could, all survive as students in the future. So where would the money come from? No one's actually offering a solution.
We
Everyone's just
built a
talking about
hotel.
issues and arguing with the university. But, okay, go on, sorry.
We built a hotel.
Now, every investment the university
And
makes...
not only did we build a hotel, right, in the time that we built a hotel...
I mean,
there's
there are
what?
academic purposes for it. It's not just, we're not just franchising a Premier Inn. Like, there are academic purposes for
Yeah,
it.
absolutely, completely. But we were already first. In terms of hospitality and tourism, we were already first, then we built the hotel.
I
Well,
suppose
to
then-
maintain the first position, you need to be competitive and you need to offer something to the students. And now, every investment that the university makes is based on the return. You try and see, can you actually make money back? Can you pay off the interest? And can you use that extra tiny bit of money to pay for student services?
No, because it goes on bonuses.
No, it does not.
22k in a year in performance bonuses
Let's look
based
at
on their own
let's
targets.
look at the remuneration package compared to
Uh-huh.
other universities, compared to the private sector.
And it's
you'll see
very
that it's
high compared to
you'll
other
see that it's
universities.
You'll see that it's what one needs to pay if one wants someone with experience and
Okay,
who's been
guys.
here a long time.
Can we move on to another point? I'm going to recognise Pete Ferguson.
So the university's been kind of expanding a lot in the last few years, and you've both talked about how essentially a key part of university, thankfully, is about the students coming here to learn. But how am I meant to be able to learn properly when the NHS surgery on the campus is no longer taking patients, and due to a administration mistake, I got deleted from it? There are too many students that have been let into the Guildford area, so now the NHS can't handle my case, and they've told me to my face, we can't give you your medication you need. You need to find emergency services for this, because the courses have been opened up, student numbers have been expanded massively, because we're just being seen as cash cows, yet how am I meant to have a decent education when I'm being told you cannot have the treatment you need? You cannot have the basic requirements for a healthy life to be a student here. I don't give a damn about some stupid hotel if Max Lou wants to build it. If he could fit,
Can't name
sorry, if the
members of
vice
the
chair, if
executive
any,
board. It's against
let me
memorandum of
rephrase that. If
understanding.
any member of the executive board wanted to build any building on campus after they secured every student's standard of living to be healthy, happy, and have everything they need, sure, go for it. But it's very clear that we do not have that. The NHS have said they can't even guarantee that by September they'll be taking on students. We could have a whole wave of thousands of students coming to live on campus, not able to get basic healthcare here. The nearest GP surgery from me now is nearly an hour away. That's not okay. Yeah, it is, because the Guildowns Medical Group doesn't let me take it on there, and I live the other side of Guildford, and they still want to get more students on campus. How is this going to help my education in any way?
I understand that another full member of the union would like to add to that point, so the chair recognises Bethany Dawson.
I just want to add that this is an issue with specifically our executive board. It's not like just a university-wide, university sector-wide problem. I've been working with Monique since I started at the university on issues of accessibility, on issues of healthcare. They aren't listening. We are telling them repeatedly things that they have to do for the good of future students and present students, like make sure that the medical services aren't oversubscribed to the extent that they can't take in new students. But it's just not happening. We've been, they are so misinformed about issues like this that they thought that blue badges were free. And when we told them, wait, they aren't, and that we need more support for disabled students to park on campus, it didn't click that that is important, that it means that actually a range of students can study at this university. This is a problem with our executive board.
In the interest of this being a debate between these two, if you could ask a question that could be answered by both of the candidates here.
Sure, just give me a minute.
Would you like us to come up?
What
Go ahead.
No. How are you meant to address an executive board that is not fully informed on issues that affect a great proportion of students here?
Reasonably fast answers, because we've got a lot of students wanting.
Wonderful. Honestly, the best way to do it is full transparency. People might not remember it or they weren't here for it, but the executive board, the meetings haven't always been closed. There was a point at which the meetings were open, and there was a point at which students could go sit and listen to how the university was run. All of those powers then got centralised. Now the meetings are all closed and everything comes out in scarce documents that have been worded, reworded, heavily edited. So literally, even as a beginning point, basic transparency that worked before and can work now.
Okay. Malcolm?
I mean, with universities competing one against the other and what investments they want to make, I'm sure that there's some commercial interest in not revealing all of the university secrets to other universities. It's a market. You're competing for students. And if the other university knows what you're going to do, well, then they can plan ahead and take the better students. Okay. And if we want our university to be better, then we need to do that.
We have a research strategy and a university strategy that we do publish to the entire world where we do that.
Okay, guys. I'm going to try and get some more questions from people who've had their hands up for a long time. So if I can go George first and then Marek. So you haven't got to keep your hands up any longer.
I promise this will end in a question, but it's got a bit of a preamble. So,
try to keep it reasonably brief, George.
Yeah, of course. So a lot of us agree, or even disagree, that like the voluntary, quote unquote, voluntary redundancies that the university has been asking for have been necessary or not. I personally think they probably haven't been. But I think my question is going to be. Do you think that the way that these, whether or not you think that they should have happened, do you think that these have been handled in a way that is good and professional? Because I've heard reports that despite them being voluntary, members of the executive board have essentially been sending out their henchmen to go around certain departments, targeting certain members of academic staff and saying, hey, look, we think that you might want to be able to move on now. And not necessarily nicely. I mean, and also there's another couple of problems that I just want to point out. First of all, people have been taking voluntary redundancies, and the executive board have been accepting those voluntary redundancies, and they haven't exactly been very smart about accepting these voluntary redundancies because they're accepting voluntary redundancies from people that they are then going on to replace. So they're not actually saving any money, they're just firing people, getting people back for the same job. Another thing to mention is that the actual mental health of the staff here at this university has been massively suffering. Staff have been checking into the Centre of Wellbeing. We have had reports of people having stress-induced emergencies, medical emergencies, and there's even been reports of some attempted suicides by staff at this campus. Do you think these quote-unquote voluntary redundancies have actually been, even if they are necessary, handled in a professional and useful manner that is indicative of a good, effective managing body?
Thank you, George.
No, and here's why. So even to vote, because the other unions are also holding votes of no confidence, you have to give your payroll number, which is a bit dodge. Apart from that, and by the way, I am not best pleased about the fact that you have to give your payroll number to be able to vote, and the idea that it's to keep track to make sure that everyone who votes can, as if we're going to have like massive voter fraud in a union election at Surrey, but okay. Aside from that, I mean, you have staff members who have reportedly been walking around describing themselves as the hatchet bitch, whatever that means, as if it doesn't create a toxic environment. Now, I'm, like I said, only a PhD student, but I can tell you that even my mental health has suffered from this because as members of staff leave, we pick up the pace. So, for example, we do more marking, we do more tutorials, we watch our supervisors leave, we watch our supervisors basically say, I don't want to reapply for my job for the 5th time in the last 7 years, so I'm going. It doesn't make for a conducive environment.
Mark.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm very sorry to hear that there have been some instances of this. I'm not sure how widespread it is, and I'm sure it's not very widespread. It's just individual occasions.
Even one person matters. That's not an excuse.
Okay.
Certainly, and I'm very sure that the university will make sure that this doesn't happen because it's important.
If
Anyways,
they were doing
so
let's let Marco answer, please. Go ahead.
So these. Could you repeat the question?
Do you think
Briefly.
the way that
Yeah,
these
briefly.
voluntary redundancies have been carried out is professional or useful or good?
Absolutely. So the redundancies, they've been done, well, as we've said, if you have a house, if you have a household, then you've got more expenses than income.
You know that businesses and universities don't actually work like households, right, in terms of income?
Well, the problem is a household can borrow money just like the university, and they know they're going to go bankrupt if they don't have more income than expenditure, and you can't buy food.
Let's let Marco answer the question.
And if you can't buy food, then the whole household collapses. So what we need to do is to make sure that we remain financially sustainable, so that everybody else can actually have a job. Now, how this EVS has been done is we've offered all individuals the possibility to leave their job with a severance package. No one has been forced out. It's a choice, and individuals can take them or not take them. And this is the most humane way of doing this, considering as you can't solve a problem, a 15 million budget deficit, by ignoring half of your expenses. You have to look at everything, and that's what's been done.
Okay, thank you. I would like to go to Marek and then Diana. I'm hesitant to get 2 questions from one student before we've had questions from other students first. So Marek first.
Thank you. So I just wanted a couple of quick points. One on sustainability. So on some of the buildings, like the 5G and the Innovation for Health, there are actually locations for solar panels built into those buildings where the solar panels have not been put because it was a short-term, I guess, saving. And as well as if you look into the library, the lamps, I believe, are very, very expensive, the ones that fit to the study spaces. And so I would be questioning some of the decisions made in investments at the university. But ultimately, I'm here to decide if to vote yes or no, right? And for that, I think one of the things is I want to find like the clearest cases where the management has either done well or done wrong, right? And to me, actually what you said, Marco, is that they've announced 15 million cuts and then said, oh, we found 6 million and now we only need 9 million cuts. Sounds to me like the situation wasn't handled as well as it should have. And the second thing is people actually say, okay, so where's the money going to come from? One of the things that I would have expected to be mentioned is one, Blackwell Farm, which is about 1,500 homes, or at least plots of land for homes that the university is going to sell off to developers, as far as I believe. And that's going to give the university a massive injection of money. And the costs from EU students, where the IB requirements are actually higher than the A-level requirements, if you were to make the A-level requirements the same difficulty as the IB requirements, you would get more EU students that could then plug the gap of the fewer A-level students here.
If we can try now move on to a question for both candidates.
Yes, so in that case, I guess that the 2 questions would be, well, do you think that 9 plus 6 million split was handled correctly, if suddenly finding 6 million isn't an issue, or that was part of the plan? And secondly, won't Blackwell Farm fill a lot of the funding issues that we're having right now?
Okay, reasonably fast answers if we can. Marco, you
Absolutely,
first.
cool. So Blackwell Farm is a plot of land at the moment. If we wait 10, 15 years for the university to build homes in it, it'll be worth 10 times as much. So to sell it at the moment, we'd just be losing a huge potential pot of money. So we're talking about, sorry, would you have a reply?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, it's happening very soon.
Yeah.
Well, yes, exactly. So they're being built, and once they're built, we can then sell them off and have a lot of money. The second issue is that it's not a one-off deficit. The problem here, the pensions funding, we're going to need to keep paying for that over the years. It's not this year we're going to pay 6 million extra and then that's it. So every year in the future, we're going to keep paying, and the fees are going to stay the same or decrease depending on a review that the government is doing. So to plug that gap, we need to take action. Yes.
Okay, Monique.
I feel like action could be taken in other ways, including better investments, first off. For example,
Hang on. Go ahead.
Anyway.
Go ahead.
Yeah. For example, rather than investing in, although it keeps coming up, buildings, invest in basically anything that gives you a better return.
For example?
Literally anything.
The buildings give more space. They make the courses better, which means we can have more students and we can pay for more
But
staff.
there's no staff there to teach.
Well, yes, there is, because otherwise no one would be attending lectures, would they?
Exactly, that's exactly the point. Because every time, literally, the gap between the highest paid and the lowest paid in the university has consistently grown, right? Where the median wages are stagnating. Quite literally, they are dead in the water, whereas executive pay has continually, each year, gone up. And not just at the rate of inflation, not just at
I mean, it was 1.5%, that's below inflation last year.
Out of curiosity, what about the bonuses? Or the pension contributions? Or the payments in kind?
They're related
or the
to the pay.
expenses? No, they're not.
Well, the pension is.
50,000.
Okay. Can we wrap at this point and move on to the next point? Can we recognise Diana? All the way around.
You're getting all your steps in.
If only we had the red cube that we can chuck. I like that one. It's a lot more fun.
Sorry,
Hello.
Thank you. So both of you have talked a lot about buildings and whether or not you agree that university should be investing more in buildings and teaching. But I think a point that hasn't been raised so far is that students we're now having to pay for our education. You might get a student loan, but it's not free money. You will have to pay it back. And for most of us now, education, it's an investment. You know, you go back 20 years maybe when the fees were, what was it, 3,000? I'm so sorry.
Apologise for the...
Oh, sorry.
Strong word with Stag TV later.
No. When fees were much lower, students, or free even, students came to university, they expected to be taught well, but that was pretty much it. But that has changed nowadays. I'm a campus ambassador. When you talk to prospective students, they don't just ask about how a lecture's like, they ask about everything. They ask about the sports pack, they ask about 5G Center, Innovation for Health. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that due to the climate and higher education, a university is not just a place to learn anymore. Students expect so much more from that. And the question I would like to ask is, how does the management plan to deal with this? Because I understand on one side, they can't cut staff as vigorously as they might need to. But on the other hand, the solution isn't to cut everything else or all the investments, because, to be really frank, we expect it, we pay for it, and, it's a lot of money.
Yes. Well, exactly, and student satisfaction is falling. Year on year, student satisfaction is continually falling, and a lot of that is based on feedback. It's based on exam feedback, assignment feedback, teaching, the size of lectures. I mean, pretty sure a massive dip happened around about the time people were being taught in the Odeon. And I think the student experience is completely and utterly affected by what's happening. And that includes, fine, yes, people want, the shiny new buildings, and people do make choices based on the facilities campuses have. It would be ridiculous for me to say they don't. But if it came down to it, I think students would care more if you told them that actually you might not be able to be registered at the GP. And we went 9 months without a manager for additional learning support. And, you know, equality and diversity as a department are being gutted. These are real things that affect the student satisfaction, student experience, and actually it puts a lot of health at risk. And I think students, especially, literally especially when you're paying the amount that you're paying, expect more, like basic healthcare.
Okay. Marco?
Absolutely. So, ever since the government stopped funding the university, obviously students have had to make up for the shortfall. Now, the university has had some issues where it's had to grow student numbers to actually stay alive and stay afloat. And in this recruitment process, the university accidentally overshot, for example, in the business school, which led to in economics, and that led to the lectures in the Odeon. Now, that's a one-off mistake, and the university is punished for this by the NSS, and the NSS comes 3 years after. So that means we're getting a delayed effect of what's happened 3 years ago, or like last year, for example.
So has the university done enough and learned from this and done enough to address these issues?
Absolutely. As I was saying earlier, the university is now deciding what faculties to actually grow their numbers and which ones to not grow their numbers. Now they're expanding. They're making a new building in Priestley Road for the nurse school. They're expanding the computer science labs so that we actually have the facilities to get more people in. Now, with the Health and Wellbeing Centre, the university management is very aware and they monitor it at every meeting, and they assign extra funding now that they know that, as you were saying, a lot of academics are stressed. So that's been happening. And in terms of the NHS ward, that's not controlled by the university, and it's controlled by the NHS and how much funding there is. What they've done is they've said, okay, we're just going to refer you to the closest possible ward, because that's what can be done. If you have a better solution, please.
Is this some of it's quite reactionary? Because things like computer science, I should know, have fallen dramatically in the league table. So are some of these things too little, too late, reactionary things?
I mean, it's a necessary reaction given what's happened. I mean, I would agree. If there's a real problem of feedback in the university and things are not getting back to the university and students don't hear enough from the university. So that's something that should be tackled. But certainly distracting the university management by trying to replace everyone, it took 1.5 years to get Max Liu. And that meant that the provost had to do 2 jobs. Excuse me. It took 1.5 years for one of the top jobs at the university. And that was 1.5 years where the other members of management had to focus on that as opposed to their duties.
Okay. So can I just point out, I shouldn't have to sit here and think about how do students access healthcare, because every university basically has a GP practice or something like it. So honestly, I'm baffled that we've got to sit here and be like, do we just arrange transport to the nearest GP that's taking people? The fact is, if the university know that the GP is oversubscribed and they are still pushing for more students, they are irresponsible because that is people's health. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to lie, I was meant to make a doctor's appointment probably about 2 weeks ago, and I haven't. Primary reason, I am terrified that I'll try and I'll be told that I am no longer on the register. And I don't know what I'd do, because for me to get to a different GP involves a very expensive taxi, Uber, whatever. So, no, there is no argument. And in terms of what the university could do now that it knows that student satisfaction is falling, now that it knows that the GP won't take any more people, now that it knows that it is oversubscribed, it could stop. And that's the issue, because 3 years down the line, like you say, it takes 3 years for the NSS to happen, we're just going to see another plummet.
Okay.
So,
very, very briefly.
Absolutely. So you don't want to increase the numbers of students, so that won't increase any income. You want to increase expenses for something that's really important, I agree with you, to pay for transport or for extra NHS funding. But you still haven't proposed a solution where the university is still here 10 years from now.
I have though.
For her, it's for the university.
I agree.
Are you asking the No campaign
to provide an answer for students not being able to get a bloody doctor.
Okay.
I agree with you. I agree with you. But here the fundamental question is, would a different management, would changing the fundamental problems are all here. We've had all of them. And you may say, oh yes, different people would actually fix the problem. But it's a problem of income and expenditure. And if we don't have enough money to pay for everything we spend, then there's no way to solve the problem.
Okay,
it's not
so
like bringing in somebody different would change the situation.
Can I just point out, you've misrepresented a couple of my arguments there, so I'd like to clarify.
Please.
I didn't say don't take more students. Probably wise that we don't. But for example, if we kept at least the same number of staff while taking in more students, that's one thing. But we're taking in more students while cutting staff. And it's both of those things together that are problematic. Now, aside from everything else, I have presented many ways in which we could save money. One of them the university has known about since 2009, and that was the environmental plan. The others are their outrageously increasing salaries, and I have provided evidence in terms of the University of Southampton, the University of Warwick, and I'm trying to remember the third one, University of Bath, who were all up in the league tables where we were at the same time when we managed to hit fourth. They have all taken cuts to VC salaries. They have all taken cuts to executive board salaries, and they range in between 25 and 30%. In that same time, ours has gone up 20-something, 29%. And we have fallen 17 places or something stupid in the league tables at the same time that those other universities have maintained their place.
Okay.
Well, I'm sure the other universities don't have the same issues we face. There's no space on campus. We've had, when we tried to recruit more students, didn't have the infrastructure in place. Okay. And so that's being built right now. So it's going to take more time to get to where Bath is.
We are going to move on to one final question for the floor. The hand's been up the longest is over here. If we could get a microphone over there.
Hi there. There was a point that was made about saving money, because it is an income versus expenditure problem. If we had all the money in the world, we'd get everything and it would be perfect, but we don't. So you mentioned the environmental plan and how we should cut that. So are you saying that it's much less important, global sustainability and things like that? Because it seems from
Yes.
what I'm seeing, is that there's problems with NHS, there's problems with education, there's problems with rent and everything like that. Everything has to come around. Everything has to be balanced, but
I think
there's
you've misunderstood.
Right.
What I mean when I say the environmental plan, in 2009, they constructed this plan. If they had put everything in place, it was estimated that, every year they would be saving something like £5 million. Anyway, they didn't. They didn't follow their own environmental strategy, and that's the issue. If they had, we would be saving a lot more money right now than we are.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. I'm not sure where you quote that figure from, but £5 million is certainly a lot of money. In terms of what's happened...
Their own document.
9 years ago, thank you. 9 years ago. Let's look at what we can do today. And what we can do today is a very hard situation. It's what we're voting on. We're saying, should we trust the university management to continue, or should we distract them to do something different? Now, I understand that everyone is very disappointed, and it's their job to find the solutions. But when they have to pick what they want to do and what they need to do, there's a lot more things going on than just what we see. Because maybe we just see one or two things we care about, but they've got everything. They've got the academics to look after, all of the staff to look after, all of the students. They have to compete on a national stage. The university is a very complicated system, and it's very hard to pick out where to make cuts, because wherever they want to make cuts, someone will be complaining. When they built the sports park, that money, someone will have complained because that money got moved from somewhere else. And today, we're building new facilities. We're building the hotel, for example. We're building Priestley Road. And 10 years from now, people will be grateful.
Okay, thank you.
I agree, and that's why I want transparency of executive board meetings.
Okay. We will be taking a question from Olivia, and there'll be no further questions from the floor.
So I'd just like to bring this sort of back to why we're here today. So the question is the performance and leadership of the governing bodies of the University of Surrey satisfactory? regardless of whether or not, your opinion is that would these issues still be here even if the management team changed? Fundamentally, the governing bodies of the university need to be held accountable for their decisions that have happened. I've been here for this is my 4th year, and I'm part of the business school, and the quality of teaching has considerably reduced over the years. We don't really get personalised feedback. Our lecturers will never know who we are, really, unless we take the effort to go and meet them. So there's just basic things here that need to be fixed. And regardless of whether changing the board would actually be effective, we don't know. But they are the ones that are to be held accountable here. So it would be nice to hear, I think, from both candidates here, sort of, I guess, to summarise your arguments, but also to really focus down on this. Because if we're not holding the governing bodies of the university accountable for their decisions, who are we meant to be holding accountable?
That's a very good question. And it would also be a suitable question to wrap your kind of outro summary statement into. So if I could give you both a minute, I suppose, to summarise your answer to the question and wrap up what you have to say, starting now.
I completely agree. I can't categorically say that, doing this means that new management will fix everything. But I do want someone held accountable because there are discrepancies. And, apparently a senior member of staff said, we don't need to justify our salaries. Well, actually, when you're cutting hundreds of jobs, you do. You do when it's 22 times that of the lowest paid worker at the university. And yes, their jobs are hard, but they certainly get paid well to do them, except they're not doing them. And no one has been held accountable. At the end of the day, I've been here for just about as long as you, and I've never seen any senior member of staff be held accountable for any of their actions. And at the end of the day, they have failed. We have very substantial evidence of them failing. And yet people are still like, but is it a distraction to do your job?
To answer your question, Olivia, the governing bodies, they're trying to solve a very hard issue. They're spending a lot of money on certain things, and with the government not increasing the fee status, there's no way for them to provide better services. So they're increasing certain numbers and making investments, and to try and improve the situation for you. I know you'll have unfortunately, maybe you'll have a very bad experience, but it's about futures, because lessons can only be learned over the course of 1 year, or 2 years, or after the NSS. So what the executive board is doing is giving future students the facilities they need to grow. So they make the IFH, they try to use the Hive to make sure that students have all of their services in one place. They're revamping the executive board to reduce costs. They're reducing middle management. So there's a lot that's being done, and we often don't recognize them for it. So I would say that it's a very hard job, and giving them more challenges than they already have on their plate is not going to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Can we actually have a big round of applause to both of the candidates, because that is, as far as I know, the longest we've had to have people stay on stage and do a debate for Surrey Decides without any breaks.
Do we get trophies?
Maybe. Anyway, voting will be opening tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and will be closing at 7 p.m. on Friday. The results will be announced on the union's social media very soon after that. Thank you very much to everyone for coming along and watching online if you watched online. It's been a pleasure to have you all, and I think that's all I have to say. So is that everything? Anyone need to add anything? No? Excellent. Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you again soon.